Okay, so here we have a very simple hello world application where you have two buttons that if you click one of the buttons, it sends one action. If you click on the other, it sends another action. And based on those two different actions, the reducer generates another state, right? One or another state. Make sense? Right? And here it is running. So the default is just carpe diem, and then message 1 or message 2 as you click these two. Okay? All right, so let's improve on this just to make it make it a little more generic here. Let's see. One of the things that you'll find is that instead of generating this dispatch functions right from the component, right, what you'll typically find is that instead each one of these will be encapsulated into a higher level function, right? And the function will be passed in, and that function will be the one responsible for actually doing the dispatch, right? So instead of the component doing the dispatch, it will call this higher level function, and the function will then do the dispatch. Right? It's a very, very common first step at decoupling these things. Right? What we want to be able to do is that these should be plain old functions, right? That we should be able to inject whatever we want and test them independently as a unit for unit testing. Right now, this dispatch is part of the that's part of the Redux framework, right? We can't actually pass in a dispatch if we want to unit test it. So instead, what we'd like to be able to do is pass a function called something like, send message 1 or send message 2, and then inject them in here as pass them as argument. Okay? Now, if we do that, we make this component completely independent, right, of any dependencies from Redux. We could actually pass a function, a plain old function, and verify that if I click on that button, it calls my function. Right, that's all I really want to test. Whether it actually talks to reducer and whatnot, that's another issue. Right? But is my component working all by itself? Okay? So let's do that first. Right? Let's do that first. Let's break up, and instead of having these functions like this, what we'd like to be able to do is pass in arguments such as send message 1 and send message 2. I would like to be able to replace this dispatch function. Right, so instead of having the dispatcher, what we'd like to be able to do is something like we call something like that. Message 1, we're going to call send message 1, or send message 2. Now notice, since we're not passing any arguments, we could just make this a little bit simpler, the syntax, like that. Because we're not passing any arguments. If we were passing arguments, then we would need the anonymous function. Right? But we're not passing any arguments. Okay? So the syntax becomes a little bit cleaner, something like this. Okay? Right? Now, obviously, these functions don't exist. Right? So it's probably I'm going to get some complaint here. If I click on this, actually, I'm not going to have any complaint. They're just not being passed. Right? There's nothing that is being called. Right? All right, so where do these live? Where do these live? Just like we mapped the state, right? Just like we mapped the state to the property, we need to do something similar with these other properties. Right? But these were mapped from the state. Right? From the state, we grabbed the values, right? And then we provided it to the properties. These two are not values, right? These are functions. So somebody's going to have to pass us as argument functions that we can call. Right? So we need something similar. We need to map to the properties, but dispatchers. We need to map dispatchers to their property. These are dispatchers. Right? These are dispatchers. That's what they do, right? They dispatch functions. Okay. All right. So let's do that. We're going to follow a similar mechanism. We're going to say say const dispatcher to property mapper. And this takes as argument the dispatch. So the dispatch function gets passed in. And what we're going to return here is, again, a JSON object that maps and says, where are you getting the send message 1? Where are you getting that? Right? What's that? It's an actual function. So the function that used to be there, that we removed, we're going to move it in here. We're going to say, here's our function, and we're going to dispatch, and it's going to dispatch the type. What was it? Message 1, right? Like that? Remember that? And same thing for the send message 2. Dispatch message 2. Okay, that's the mapper. Right? So that means these are the properties. Yes? And in here I'm mapping it from a data from the state, and here I'm mapping it to some function that depends on the dispatch. Okay? And who sends it, who maps it and actually gives it to the property? Well, just like the connect, right? The connect was the one who was doing the mapping, extracting from the state and mapping to the property. Same thing. Here we're going to pass the dispatch to property mapper. So the connect does those two things. Okay, all right. So let's see. Okay, we're back where we were. We're back where we just left before. So we have exactly what we had earlier, but we ripped the dispatches from within the component and we put it instead in a mapper. Right? What this does is that now it leaves our component completely. Oh, sorry, we forgot to do this. I don't need the dispatch anymore here. It's completely unaware, right, that it's even using Redux. Right? It's just a plain function. It has no dependencies whatsoever. It's easy to test this all by itself. Right? This is why Redux has become so popular. Right? Is that it makes it very, very easy to test all these as if they were just pure functions. Right? The problem with testing stateful objects is that they evolve over time, and to replicate a particular test, you need to put the application in a particular state. That's very hard. Ideally, you want to have them stateless so you can test them independently. All right, so excellent. So our component is stateless. So let's keep going. Let's move a couple of things into where they belong. Let's move into a couple of files.